Thank you for joining BFI China today for our seminar series, China in Today's World. My name is Zhiguo He, and I'm a professor of finance at the Chicago booth and a director of BFI China. It is really my great pleasure to introduce today's speakers, who will engage in a dynamic discussion on Hong Kong's journey with China as it relates to critical current changes, population dynamics, Hong Kong's role as China's global financial center, the state of education in Hong Kong, and more. First, let me begin by introducing Dr. Anissa Chan. Her Chinese name is Chen Huangli Juan. She right now is in 2017, she was commissioned by the HKSAR government to chair the task force on review of school curriculum. Okay. Our second honored speaker is Dr. Anthony Yeung. Sorry that maybe that the pronunciation is a bit off, but his Chinese name is, I heard about many times, Liang Dingbang. So right now, Dr. Yeung serves as the chairman of the Hong Kong Independent Police Complaints Council and the chairman of the Asia Academy of International Law. Today's discussion will be moderated by Bernard Yeung. Bernie is our Chicago booth alumni. She got a PhD here. She was an NYU professor, then served as a dean for the NUS, National University of Singapore Business School, and he is very active on Asia economics, academia, and everything. We were good friends. We share a lot of common views on Hong Kong. And Bernie, floor is yours.
Thank you, Zhiguo. Hello, everyone. Again, I'm Bernard Yeung. Welcome to China in Today's World, Hong Kong, a journey with China. For those in Asia, a very bright morning, and for those in North America, I hope that you will have a good night. Hong Kong experienced the 2019 to 20 social unrest, which really caused a lot of trouble in Hong Kong. And currently, now we have the national security law and the election law. The election reform proposal. In the future, historians will give us a fair assessment of what happened. There are a lot of things we don't fully know. We look forward to understanding this better in the future. Today, our conversation's focus is on what will be for Hong Kong now and in the future. We are delighted to have Tony and Anissa with us. Zhiguo has already introduced them, so let me say a few more words about each of them. Dr. Tony Neoh, a senior counsel of the Hong Kong Bar Association, in addition to what Tony has introduced, is an internationally renowned legal expert in international litigation, arbitration, and financial regulations, and has made many important contributions to the development of Hong Kong and China. I fondly remember, because many of us in Hong Kong remember his contribution as one of the founding assistant director of Hong Kong's the ICA's Independent Council of Anti-Corruption, Independent Council for Anti-Corruption. And he also chaired the Hong Kong Security and Social and Future Commissions in the 90s, and was a chief advisor for the Hong Kong Securities Regulatory Commission. And also he is very well known in the international legal studies and has visited famous law schools in the East and West, including Tsinghua and Harvard Law School. And Dr. Anissa Chan is someone that many people just admire her. She's an eminent education leader, and she's the founding person of Hong Kong's Principals Institute. And besides chairing the task force on review of school curriculum, she's also current council member and honorary fellow of the Education University in Hong Kong. And what I as a student, remember the most is that she is the very successful, very famous principal of one of the Hong Kong's, or the best Hong Kong school, the St. Paul's Co-ed College, for 14 years. Tony and Anissa, thank you very much. Thank you very much to have you here early in the morning to help us on this important question. I want to focus again on what is happening now, what are the changes, and what will be in place for Hong Kong in the future. I cannot help but start with the national security law and the proposals on election reform. Let me quote the Wall Street Journal, posted on February 25th. It says, "Freewheeling former British colony brought to heel by new national security law. However, many in Hong Kong, because I also read Hong Kong's the newspapers and friends over there, they really utterly praise the law for restoring normalcy in Hong Kong." The opinion is very polarized. The West and the East, it depends on where you go. Then the proposal on the election reforms bring a similar discussion. South China Morning Post on March 6 ran a headline, "Hong Kong's elections reform, a patriots only game or circuit breaker against radicalization." So this is really the right kind of question. We're very polarized. We do not know what really is there. So Tony, you're the best person that I can turn to. Please help us clarify. Let us understand what the national security law and what the election reforms are about. Please, I look forward to learning from you on this.
No, you're so kind, Bernie. But we have to go back a bit into history. In 1985, when the Sino-British Joint Declaration was signed, the world was in the Cold War with Russia and what they call the communist bloc. The reason why the Joint Declaration is called a Joint Declaration and not, in fact, a treaty of retrocession was this. The Britain regarded the treaties that were signed with China back in the 19th century as being good international law treaties. China never, in fact, accepted that because Hong Kong and Kowloon and the new territories were actually, in fact, extracted from China by force of arms. And China, all along in history, regarded that as unequal treaties. And which is why, in fact, in 1985, when the Sino Joint Declaration was signed, Hong Kong was, according to that treaty, was to be not actually given back to China by Britain, but China resumes its exercise of sovereignty over Hong Kong. In other words, China regards Hong Kong as having been administered by the British, but has always been Chinese territory. So what the Joint Declaration said were two things, is that the capitalist system and the legal system in Hong Kong will continue. And secondly, Hong Kong will, as and when, in fact, circumstances permit, go towards the road of democracy. Now, what has happened is that the legal system has done very well. In fact, the common law system thrives in Hong Kong. And in fact, we have foreign judges, in fact, sitting in our Court of Final Appeal. Indeed, one of them actually wrote in the Times a day before yesterday, saying how important it is to them and to the judicial system in Hong Kong. Now, that has enabled, in fact, the financial system, the economy, in fact, to thrive. Now, what has not gone well, in fact, was, in fact, the road to democracy. The reason is that really back in the days of the Cold War, the communist bloc was hated by the West. And this ethos or philosophy, in fact, has gone on in Hong Kong even after the resumption of sovereignty, which is why, Bernie, you said that the world is very divided and polarized. We have actually the Western view, which says that, you know, there should be democracy in the idiom of the Western liberal democracy system, whereas China, of course, looks at Hong Kong very differently. It looks at Hong Kong as being a resumption to its mother body, and therefore the people of Hong Kong should identify themselves with China and not with the rest of the world. Herein lies the difficulty, and which is why we saw, in fact, last year, 2019, and 2020. In fact, all of these troubles that we've had in Hong Kong, mainly because a very large section of the community, principally very young people, in fact, don't believe in being part of China. And that is really the backdrop, in fact, to the national security law. The other bit of history is that when the basic law was published in 1991 and went into effect on 1 July 1997, there was an important article in the basic law which says that Hong Kong should enact national security laws, but Hong Kong never managed to do that.
That's the Article 23, right?
That is Article 23 indeed. And Hong Kong never managed to do that. And Hong Kong then met with these troubles back in 2019, and the national government then had to step in and said, well, you know, we've given you 23 years to do this. You haven't done that. You're now in trouble. So we have to do that. The other thing about electoral reform is this.
But that, Tony, I interrupt you. That national security law was through the Article 18, right? The legal legitimacy.
Actually not done through Article 18, actually. The national security law was actually a nationally promulgated law, which was then applied to Hong Kong under Annex 3 of the Basic Law.
Thank you.
So it didn't come through Article 18. It is something that is an exercise of sovereignty by the national government and then applied to Hong Kong by way of Annex 3. The other thing about democracy was this, is that during the Troubles, you actually see a lot of people trying to dissociate themselves from China. And in fact, there was actually a very clear force of separatism in Hong Kong, and which is why, in fact, after the national security law came in, the national government then had to plan as to how democracy would go forward, in fact, in the future. And one of the basic terms was that really people who regard themselves as being a Hong Kong person should really identify themselves with the national spirit. In other words, be a patriot. And that really was the sort of history behind this.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is this so? What are the changes that this will impact on Hong Kong?
I think that the changes would be positive. I think to start with, let's start with the national security law. And I would recommend people who want to know a little bit more about that to go to the AIL.org. This is the Asian Academy of International Law. We did, in fact, a webinar on that with experts from around the world to compare the national security law with national security laws of other countries. And in fact, the national security law that we have in Hong Kong is a lot tamer, actually, than the national security laws of the UK, countries in Europe and the United States. Nonetheless, it is necessary to keep order in Hong Kong. So really, it has helped people who want stability to actually understand that really China is serious to ensure that there is stability in Hong Kong. And China, of course, as a sovereign country, has every right to expect its citizens, and Hong Kong, of course, is part of China, to respect, in fact, the country. So therefore, that's really the reason behind it. And we see now the financial markets coming back. Money actually has been flowing in Hong Kong rather than out. The Hong Kong dollar is stable, and the stock market is doing very well, particularly with companies from China listing in Hong Kong. Alibaba came back to Hong Kong to list, and they wanted to list Ant Financial last year, but it didn't happen because of regulatory problems in China. And a lot of these tech companies are doing very well. They've retreated a little bit recently because of the yields, the bond yields, but nonetheless, they're doing very well. So there we are. Essentially, we're getting the return of stability, and therefore the return of a stable financial market.
I'm going to turn to Dr. Chan very soon. Tony, I need one more clarification. What if I worry that this national security law and also this, maybe not the reform, but the national security law, would it mean that it is an extension of Chinese law onto Hong Kong? How does it jive well with preserving Hong Kong's legal system, the common law system and the legal independence?
Actually, all Hong Kong law is Chinese law, incidentally. Our system, of course, works under the common law system because we're part of China. Every single Hong Kong law is Chinese law, incidentally. But then we work under the common law system, and therefore we interpret and apply, in fact, the laws are promulgated by the National People's Government for NX3 by way of the lens of the common law, as well as the administration of justice, which is enacted under the common law. So again, it doesn't really affect us at all, except that, of course, the substance of the national security law needs enforcement, and it is new to Hong Kong. But the police, in fact, are very adept at doing that, and there have been prosecutions, no convictions yet, so we have to wait for the courts to decide on this. So we're going through the process at the moment.
So thanks for this. What I get is that there's full respect of the common law system in Hong Kong, and respectful of Hong Kong's laws, administration of the law. Am I correct in this quick interpretation?
Absolutely, and that is very important to Hong Kong.
Yeah. Yeah. And Anissa, you have many students. Many of your ex-students are now very important people in Hong Kong. You must feel the pulse really well. Please tell us on the ground how people view this pending changes or the national law.
Right. Let me share with you my feelings and perspective as an ordinary citizen, and especially or from an educator's perspective. I mean, I agree that. I mean, first of all, I mean, for a stretch of 7 months since June 2019 up to for a stretch of period of 7 months, there have been chaos and destructions, and the scale of protests has been escalating, and there are no protesters in the name of democracy actually undermine democracy by taking away, by restricting the freedom of human rights of safety, freedom of expression to those who disagree with their political demands. And so I agree that the national security law was seen by many Hong Kong people as to bring an end to this chaos and destructions. Especially, we were heartbroken when see alarming percentage of young people taking to the street to protest, and also what happens in schools when there are misconduct being investigated now by the Education Bureau of misconduct of teachers. So the national security law was seen by many as important to bring peace and bring back normalcy in life. Now, however, undeniably, there are a large percentage of people and also some politicians who supported the mass protest, who kind of support in a tacit way the protests by providing shelter, transportation, resources, and money, by voting in the recent district council, by voting and getting a majority win in the seats by those who are, who kind of anti-government and against pro-establishment, against pro-Beijing candidates. So we cannot neglect the large percentage of Hong Kong people who feel dissatisfied, disheartened by the present administration, or whether, and also there is a kind of a negative sentiment towards China. And with the election reform proposed, I think there are questions to be asked. I mean, there are questions being asked. Will Hong Kong's autonomy, democracy be diminished? I mean, will there be any only monolithic voice and views be heard? Will the representation of the people be restricted? I think there are these questions. And also, how do we answer to those who voted for the district council and who won a huge among the 18 district councils, there are 17 who are in the control of the pro-democratic camp, and those who are against the establishment party, or against who won by those who are against the pro-establishment sector. I mean, these are the questions. I think importantly also to ask is whether the election reforms should be introduced, whether it can, it is purported to bring normalcy in life, and also purported to ensure that the administration can govern more efficiently, can bring about more efficient, a high efficacy of the administration. So this is a real test. I mean, how can it ensure? How can it and do that? I mean, so we are people really looking at in what is it by having the patriots ruling Hong Kong. So how do you define patriots? Are those liberal patriots? Those patriots, can they introduce diversity in views? Are they capable, and are they virtuous? And there are many internal issues in Hong Kong, long-term issues in Hong Kong that need to address. So all these, I mean, there are issues. I mean, it's not just bringing normalcy in life, but also there are a lot of internal issues to address. I mean, what affect the ordinary people. We know that we cannot be independent. We know that we have to be under China's sovereignty. That we understand. The one country, two systems is the best model to bring Hong Kong forward. But I think all these has to be answered, and these are legitimate questions. Yes.
So all this are really Article 1. Hong Kong is a part of China, and people who participate in leading Hong Kong should be people who recognize this Article 1. And then one of the points you mentioned that's described the point number 5 of Hong Chan's speech is about the efficiency, the efficacy of government. So it's about Article 1, our identity, are we Chinese or not? And only those that accept Article 1 they should be the type that we like to be in the government, and we want the government to be efficient and effective, essentially. At the same time, yes. At the same time, there will be a lot of things to settle in the future because Hong Kong has changed a lot since 2009. And along this line, Anissa, I want to ask a question. Many people, supposedly, there's now an outward immigration movement, and the newspaper every now and then will say that, oh, business are leaving Hong Kong and so on and so forth. So, will the pearl of the Orient lose its shimmer and shine forever? But at the same time, as someone who grew up in Hong Kong, I saw some of this outward migration waves in '67 and in '80s, and Hong Kong survived and even prospered. So would you mind to have us to have a realistic assessment? Because I know that the newspapers are giving us sensational stories. I want the down-to-earth interpretation.
Right, yes. In the recent survey, I mean, in the recent survey of over 1,000 Hong Kong age 35 or below having a university degree holder, in this very recent survey in January, about a quarter of them plan to move out of Hong Kong in 5 years' time. However, I mean, among them, half of them, they will come back if there is more. If there is more job prospect, once they have obtained the foreign passport. So you see, Hong Kong people is very versatile, versatile and pragmatic. Okay, in another, I recently met with some university administrators. They told me that as yet, they do not have any difficulties in recruiting overseas scholars, academics to come to work in Hong Kong. because Hong Kong to them is still very attractive. And the impact of all these reform and the law is yet to be seen. So at the moment, they do not fear of anything that would infringe their, the right and freedom, etc. So I mean, moving out of Hong Kong, but look at them. Many of them came back. The second generation came back because Hong Kong is still very attractive in terms of, the being the lowest tax, having the lowest tax, safest city, the ease of transportation and the healthcare and everything being attractive. And they, but up to now, Hong Kong has been enjoying one of the lowest unemployment rate. And Hong Kong people, overseas, I think it's good for them to get an exposure to overseas living conditions and employment condition. And then perhaps I'm pretty confident that they may appreciate Hong Kong better. So obtaining kind of a assurance, they would somehow thinking of maybe if they come back, they're just versatile and very fluid. Many of us have studied overseas, worked overseas, but also come and go to Hong Kong, to China, Shanghai, Beijing. So we are kind of international people. Right. So I'm still positive. I'm still positive about, I'm not too weary about this immigration, the flux of people going out. Yeah. So I mean, it's still early to see, and I'm pretty positive about.
Right. Realistically, based on the statistics, you say only about 12.5. Maybe for good.
I'm positively
will come back. Right. And by the way, my own experience is that many of my mentees, they were running to Hong Kong to seek jobs, and because the pay is very good. Tony, let us turn to you for your view. I mean, you're also intimately related to the, contribute to the financial sector. So give us your perspective on like this migration situation. And is it going to affect Hong Kong's competitiveness? And Anissa say no, she's very positive in this. She's very hopeful, if I may put words into her mouth. Your turn.
Well, Bernie, you and I are roughly the same age. I think I'm a bit older. I still remember that when I finished school, that's back in the 60s, and all of us wanted to go to the UK or America, in fact, to study, because those are the opportunities which are available then. You went as well. I didn't go. I stayed in Hong Kong, but many of my contemporaries, in fact, went overseas because the opportunities are overseas, and the study opportunities are overseas. But now, in fact, we now have some of the best universities in China, as well as in Hong Kong. And therefore, really, people would begin, in fact, to consider actually going to Tsinghua, Beida, Fudan, and all of these universities in China, which have excellent research facilities, world-class professors, and so on. So really, I don't see emigration as an issue at all. Hong Kong has always been an open place. I have worked in many countries overseas, so have you. I find Hong Kong, of course, as being the best place, including China, mainly because of its connections with China. And I actually keep a home in Beijing. And that's what a lot of Hong Kong people do. So I'm not worried. I think one of the issues that Anissa pointed out is that indeed there are many issues that we need to solve in Hong Kong. But I think there is one single issue we must be very, very careful about and be very, very strict about it is this. You see, Hong Kong has gone back to China, and any part of a body which actually goes back to the main body cannot reject the main body. In fact, if it does, then it will actually wither away. And this is the essential question. I think that's the reason why central government talks about patriotism. It is just no more than a metaphor, in fact, for this very important idea that whoever stays in Hong Kong and works in Hong Kong must regard his own identity and his own future is being tied to the country. That is all. Now, the rest, in fact, are mechanics. Yes, we do have problems. We have to work them through. But then if people do not subscribe to this basic idea, then we have no future.
That's very important. Can you repeat and speak louder? The basic idea is, Tony?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Would you mind to repeat your last sentence? I think it's very important. The patriotism and the one country, the implication is there's a basic idea, and that basic idea that we must subscribe to is?
Yeah, the thing is this, patriotism is not abstract. Patriotism is something that people will have to agree and to live their life accordingly. And therefore, anybody who sees himself as having a future in Hong Kong must identify himself or herself as being part of the country. Because we are part of one body. And part of one body cannot actually reject the other. I think once we subscribe to this idea and live our life accordingly, the future can be solved. Yes, there are issues. I don't deny them. And Anissa has enumerated those issues. But we need this basic concept. And that's the reason why there has been this accent on patriotism and so on. I think it is no more than really people subscribing to the idea and living their lives accordingly. It is as simple as that.
Thank you. Yes, Anissa?
Yes, I totally agree with Tony. So I think we cannot, I mean, well, I think the majority of the Hong Kong people understand we are definitely part of we are definitely under Chinese sovereignty. And it is undeniably, we are Chinese national. There's no, I mean, we don't have any future if we do not form part of being part of China in, I mean, again, this is not a concept, this is a reality. And so, I mean, that's most Hong Kong people. So, I mean, the majority, the huge overwhelming majority is saying that Hong Kong cannot definitely be independent in whatever way. And so, I mean, and I think it is good to see that our government, the Chinese government, is saying that patriots, I mean, the definition of patriots can be as liberal as possible, so as to cast a large network of people working for the benefit of Hong Kong. I mean, even if patriots, the terms of patriots has is qualifying sort of qualifying condition for admission to the candidature for CE and also for the Legislative Council. But the patriot is definitely is needed, but that is the patriots in the broadest sense. So the patriots can be critical, but having constructive criticism. The patriots can be from different political party participating in the administration of Hong Kong. So I think the Chinese officials realize that Hong Kong has also this internal problems and issue to solve. But then patriot is definitely undeniably we have something that we have to subscribe, all that we have to subscribe to it.
We spent half an hour on this very important thing. Hong Kong historically is a part of China and has returned to China in 1995. Hong Kong is a part of China, and that is in the basic law, and that is in the negotiation, in the joint declaration, and so on. So now it's really about accepting a position that Hong Kong is a part of China, and we need to subscribe to that basic principle. The outside image of what Hong Kong is may be different. So I'm going to turn to Tony again. I'm looking for a reboot of Hong Kong. I'm looking for Hong Kong rebuilding its global image. Given the given the information gap, the understanding gap, and all the things that's happened, what should Hong Kong's government, what should Hong Kong's social and business leaders, political leaders do to reboot Hong Kong, to rebuild its global image?
I think the unifying principle in all of this is actually what China calls patriotism, but what I call in actual real life definition is really seeing your own future as working with China as one nation. And that is the reason why, in fact, if you use the word reboot, I think that the word reboot means that people has to understand China a lot more. And China has been much misunderstood, both in Hong Kong and around the world. I have worked in China since 1985, as you know, and many of people of my colleagues in the legal profession, as well as colleagues in fact in many professions in Hong Kong, have actually worked in China and helped, in fact, with its modernization, including your good self, Bernie. And we see actually that China has, of course, grown leaps and bounds, and it will be, in fact, one of the most important economies of the 21st century, if not the most. And therefore, really, there is a future, in fact, in working for the nation. Now, many things have changed a lot, in fact, since 1997. A lot of people don't understand it. The people in the West don't understand this, mainly because a lot of that is in Chinese. And there's not enough, in fact, publication of what is happening. So what we need to do is actually to understand China more, and for China to explain itself better as well. So this is a two-way street. It is not just a one-way street. But there is so much which is happening in China that the opportunities are so immense. In fact, I feel very proud and in fact very hopeful as being a member of the Hong Kong community and having connections in China.
Thank you. Anissa, your view?
Yes, I mean, Tony, I mean, Tony, I mean, well, understanding of China, yeah, definitely agree, and what I'm apart from that, I mean, I'm saying that the whole community of Hong Kong, the business community, the whole Hong Kong people, I think because of what we have and we have seen endure the unhappiness, the disruption, the chaos, and the lack of trust and confidence, I think it's time for the whole community of Hong Kong to remember and I would say to re-celebrate or to rediscover the beauty of Hong Kong. I mean, we have built Hong Kong, our ancestors, our forefathers have built Hong Kong to where it is now. I mean, let's pick up again and appreciate the beauty of the Hong Kong people's quality, the can-do spirit, the resilience, the audacity, the grit, and the people, the Hong Kong people, and secondly, the Hong Kong social fabric and infrastructure, the legal structure, everything that we are so proud of that make up the infrastructure of Hong Kong that attracts so many people to come to work in Hong Kong. Attracting, we call this our home, a place that we will try our very best to protect and safeguard. So I think we have forgot how good Hong Kong is, still is. I mean, so many good things about Hong Kong. And we are so broiled in all the political and social unrest and dissatisfaction and negative sentiments. Let put it more positive energy and forces to remember what we have and what we still in possession of. And let's build confidence and trust in Hong Kong and among us. And also the younger generation. I mean, I'm very concerned and worried about the young generation, the undue influence that they are, from biased view, but from lack of understanding about China. I mean, the whole negative sentiments, the undue influence from what propaganda. I mean, the building of trust and confidence is important. I mean, it is this returning of a heart and is returning of the heart.
I agree with all this.
I won't say returning of heart. Yes. Yes.
I have to agree
So-
completely with Anissa on this one. You know, there is so much which is beautiful in both China and Hong Kong. You look at mental pop, all of our stars, people like Lau Dekwa and so on and so forth, and and so on. You know, those are my my stars. That shows how old I am. But nonetheless, you know, there's this tremendous amount of that. The Cantonese food, in fact. And the splendor of Chinese history that we have yet, many of our young people have yet to learn.
Yeah.
There's so much which is in the horizon, and you know, why don't we grab it? Basically, simple as that, in my own view.
Yeah.
How about, I mean, it would be useful to kind of having set up a kind of a I wouldn't want to say campaign, but a kind of a movement. You know, hopefully it's a bipartisan movement. You know, holding all of us together is not political, but it's really for Hong Kong people. I mean, and also, I mean, a platform is important to establish a discourse and dialogue with the young people. I'm very concerned about the young people, the lost generation. There's several generations being lost in a way.
Yeah.
You know?
I will have to assure you that, Dr. Chan, I need to give you some time on this very important point of the youth and so on. But in order to really to get the best out of the two, I can feel your passion, and I'm on your side too. At the same time, I need to be the devil's advocate. So I'm going to say something. I'm going to say something that not I believe, but I try to represent the other side. What if I say that one of the major functions of Hong Kong is being a financial center? Financial center is about information flow and trust. Okay, and so I would have to ask the question: can I really trust? Has Beijing not broken any law? Will Beijing allow me to continue, if I sit in central district, continue to have access to all kinds of information I need to have in order to carry out my job? So the hardcore of Hong Kong, the financial center, rely on good law, rule of law, and the common law, and that now, okay, yes, China is the country, but will China, did China ever, or will China ever break its law, and so on and so forth? This would be in the heart of many people who are functioning in the financial district. And would I have freedom of access of information? So I want to ask you this question: can Hong Kong retain its financial center? And with all these questions I just raised, what we are concerned, how to answer them?
First of all, I would say Hong Kong will remain a very important financial center, irrespective of what happens in the future. But I will explain that in a moment. But you talk about information. But if you talk about information, the most important thing about information is that you have to have a high signal to noise ratio. In other words, there is a lot of noise around the world, in fact, about some of the issues that you have. But in order to get the right information, we have to get the signal. In fact, at the moment, I can say the signal to noise ratio among the world, among general public, is very low, actually. You know, I would love to have, in fact, a machine that has a signal to noise ratio of 99.9. And it has never been achieved, but hopefully one day it will achieve it. But nonetheless, that is the important point, which is why we have to see the reality, in fact, for the noise. And the reality is this, is that China has never broken a single law, incidentally. It has always kept to the basic law, word for word, in fact. Now, the reason why people say China has broken its promise and so on is because of a different perspective. And as I've said, when Britain, in fact, handed back China, Hong Kong to China, it regarded it as retrocession. China never regarded that as retrocession. In fact, China says, we're taking back something that always belonged to us. And therefore, the people of Hong Kong are always Chinese. But the people of Hong Kong, because of various reasons that we have discussed, didn't quite believe that. And that's the reason why, therefore, we need that belief. The second thing about information in the financial markets, is to ensure that we see the reality. Now, because of that, there are so many rules around the world. The IMF, the World Bank, OECD and so on have very strict rules on, in fact, testing information. And China, in fact, has a statistical system and an information system, which, in fact, benchmarks to these rules, in fact. And the IMF, in fact, every year, in fact, publishes a report on those benchmarks, actually. And you can see that in the Article 4 reports of the IMF. So again, you'll see that China, in fact, regards, in fact, A, abiding by laws and treaties, and B, ensuring, in fact, that the right information and the right signals, in fact, go over the voice, the noise, to ensure that we have a very good SN ratio. Now, that is how, in fact, financial markets work. And in fact, we look at the future right now. China, in fact, has got a controlled currency, which is the RMB, getting bigger, and we're going into digital currencies very soon. Nonetheless, it is still a controlled currency. Hong Kong is the only free monetary market in China. And it will be for quite some time. And it's quite well known. It is very, very hard to actually completely open a capital account for a big country like such as China. It is in many parts highly developed, in many parts highly undeveloped. So therefore, in order to really sort of reach some kind of normalcy, it will take a very, very long time for the capital account to be open. So Hong Kong, in fact, is a very, very important buffer in there. And therefore, the stability of the financial system and its ability, in fact, to transmit accurate information over the noise is paramount. And that is why all the financial regulators in Hong Kong, including myself, when I was, in fact, a financial regulator, regards this as our primary duty.
So Hong Kong remain yes,
can I chip in here? Yes. I think one of the very important thing is Hong Kong needs to take the initiative to Hong Kong and China. I mean, well, have to take the Hong Kong. I mean, have to take the initiative of magnifying the signal. I mean, wouldn't be the business community, the professional community, and Hong Kong officials go on a tour and Hong Kong. I mean, all the what Tony talked about, we and telling our side of the story. I mean, taking up the narrative, so that I mean, in that, I don't know whether there is a way to have whether there are channels, possibilities, or means to take up the narrative to tell what we've been doing and what Tony had talked about, the financial sector, the regulations and the legal aspects. I mean, and to put it right. I mean, put the information. I mean, this is a correct, the flow, the information, put it in a more accurate and a signal to higher signal to noise ratio.
To put it,
I mean, this is what the government and the community, the business community can help definitely a lot.
Thank you.
On that
to put
point.
it succinctly, right now, what you two are talking about is Hong Kong is still a free financial window, and it still has the rule of law. So we are doing okay. And then we, at the same time, we need to ascertain that we reduce the signal to noise, to reduce the noise in the signal.
Perhaps I might just put it this way, Bernie. I mean, no place is without problems.
Right.
And Hong Kong has its share of problems, as Anissa very succinctly puts it. But then, every place, if it wants to succeed, it has to deal with hard issues and deal with hard information. In other words, to put it very crudely, no BS, basically. Very crudely, basically. And therefore, really, every bit of information which has got to be true, it's got to be testable, and therefore really sort of sound right to people. I think any community has to survive on this, and every profession has to survive on this, and therefore really, I think Hong Kong has got a good reputation of not doing BS, essentially. Which is why a very large part of our population is non-political, incidentally.
So we should really drill on that part and rebuild Hong Kong's image and reboot Hong Kong. Sorry, I interrupt you, Tony, because Anissa has a point that's very important. I continuously interrupt her, and I do want her to give her now the time and space to get into the question about Hong Kong stakeholder, the youth for the future, reintegration of them into the mainstay of Hong Kong. Anissa, you mentioned a lot of very important things in the various injections that you put in. So let me give you the time and the floor.
Right. I mean, there's been a lot of talking about is education a failure in Hong Kong. I mean, to account for what's happening to the younger generations and what's happening in school, I think education has its shared kind of responsibility. That education, being a social enterprise, cannot be taken apart from the social development and the social phenomenon. The social phenomenon being what we have just discussed about there's lack of trust and there is misconception and biased views about China. And also what we have actually looking from recent development, recent incidents about since 2003, having a lot of Chinese tourists coming to Hong Kong, buying things, and there is a lack of hospital wards and a lack of infant milk. I mean, all these things that touch on the livelihood of Hong Kong people, and congestion in transportation, etc., and even the allegations of raising the property, the housing, the property price being raised because of the Chinese tourists and whatever migrants coming to Hong Kong. I mean, there are a lot of unfavorable views and opinions about having people coming from Hong Kong and also and they're forming a negative perception, and also the perception of lack of the poor record of human rights, infringement of intellectual properties, and everything about China and everything about what impact on the livelihood of Hong Kong people over the years since 2003. And I've been talking, with some sociologists saying that 2009 is a turning point, in that since then there's been escalating of negative sentiments of Hong Kong people towards China. And under this influence of negative perception and lack of historical understanding of historical development of China and the good things about what's happening to China from a lowly start and now to a world power. Also the fact that, the Hong Kong education has not really paid a serious attention to a systematic introduction of a national education curriculum. I mean, sometimes it's just hard data it's just hard data without, putting in a lot of, affection and, effective elements into the curriculum or the curriculum design and implement. And all these had added up, and together with the fact that I've been telling Bernie about, the identity issue of the young generations of Hong Kong. Young age to young generations of Hong Kong. So there's an identity issue. We identify more with Hong Kong than with China. We don't have any bonding with people in China. We don't have many of us don't go back to China to visit our relatives, unlike our parents. So lack of bonding, the identity with Hong Kong rather than China, lack of understanding of the historical development, and the education we receive about the human rights, democracy, and the personal the privacy is more Western culture, Western education beliefs and values, and less about I mean, we are really under the influence of these many things. So, I mean, with that social environment and ambience, atmosphere, the middle generations, those in the 30s, 40s, and also the younger generations. I mean, a lot of these influence and making up to what happens now to many young people taking up to the street. Apart from that, I mean, I would say there's a neglect of the proper, the proper nurturing of people's ethics and values, morals and ethics and value education in school. We are too instrumental in the sense that people want to get to university by means of academic scores, those skills and capability, less on the people's qualities, less about how good that they are in terms of these qualities in the moral and ethical sense. I know this is, I mean, it's more instrumental, it's kind of more extrinsically driven. So all these, but there's a room to.
We seem to have a technical problem.
So I think that would account to what.
Anissa, you seem to have a technical problem. There seems to be a glitch. You're frozen. No, it's frozen.
No, I mean, I'm about to finish. I think there's a lot of room to improve on education, but education, I mean, alone cannot solve this problem. Is also societal, is also education. So that's why I'm saying that we improve the whole society.
Right.
Rather than education alone cannot resolve. I mean, education alone can only do one part, has not gone into the heart and the trust and the confidence of the present generations.
Thank you. So it takes a holistic effort.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to Tony. Seems to Tony, you.
I just wanted to make 2 points very quickly. I have seen, in fact, quite a number of questions have come in about the legal system in China, and I will answer them in writing. But let me just say one thing very quickly, is that the legal system in Hong Kong is part of the Chinese legal system. However, in fact, we are regarded within the Chinese constitution as a separate jurisdiction. And therefore, really, the common law as well as the civil law, in fact, applies in China, but the common law in Hong Kong and the civil law in China. And China actually has made leaps and bounds, in fact, in the legal system. But then they do not actually affect the Hong Kong system as such, although there's a lot of cross-border issues that in fact involves knowledge of both sides. And I will answer those questions in writing as soon as possible. The other thing I would ask people to look for is actually to go to the aail.org website. In fact, you'll find a lot of the answers you want, but I will answer these questions in writing as soon as I can. I cannot do it right away. I have meetings all day, but I'll do that tonight.
Thank you all very much for that, Tony. We are now coming to the conclusion. We have a lot of very important things that you passionately pass on to us. The one China principle. We are part of China, and there exists a lot of negative noise. A lot of negative noise in our signals, and we really need to nurture people's proper attitudes and so on. There's so many I cannot conclude, but Anissa and Tony, I'll ask each of you to say a few sentences to conclude the session. What would you want the rest of the world to know about Hong Kong and the future?
Ladies first.
Should I start? Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, I think Hong Kong's future really depends on whether it can be included in China's long-term strategic development. And also both parties are vigilant in safeguarding the one country, two systems. I mean, Hong Kong needs to accept China's sovereignty. And at the same time, it expects China to respect the constitutional status of Hong Kong. having a unique political system. We Hong Kong people regard our judiciary, independent judiciary system as most important, as the most important pillar on which Hong Kong is built. Its autonomy is continuous. Autonomy and independence is a vote of confidence for its future, for Hong Kong's. I think healthy, an expression, forms of statements of expression of whatever forms, so long as they are criticisms, very critical of the government, is seen as important to propel Hong Kong to its future. So it is and also is imminent upon us now to reinvigorate Hong Kong by injecting it with positive energy, confidence, and hope. By rediscovering, rebuilding Hong Kong, the can-do spirit of resilience, grit, audacity, and community spirit of care and community. Now, our forefathers have left us a legacy and built a beautiful Hong Kong. It is now upon us to build a better future for our generations and the generation, for our young generations and the generations to come. Thank you.
That's excellent. I'm totally for that. Thank you, Anissa. I hope many people listen to you. Tony, please.
I will put it shortly. I think the future of Hong Kong can only be that Hong Kong, the people of Hong Kong should regard themselves as part of one nation. And there are opportunities in one nation. I have been proud as a member of the family, in fact, to be able to serve China in many ways, in the same way that my grandfather, in fact, came back to China in 1906 to serve as one of the first justices of the Supreme Court. And I will continue to do so, and I feel proud.
Thank you very much, both of you. I'm listening to you, actually, I turn emotional. Hong Kong is a part of China. Hong Kong's problem is the pan-Chinese problem. At the same time, this is an opportunity in front of us. Hong Kong as an international city with its freedom and the rule of law has a lot of competitive advantage. There's a lot of beautiful things we can do. We should see this as a chance to reboot, to rebuild, to reconstruct, to re-engage, to contribute what we can do, to not just about a brighter future of Hong Kong, but also contribute to the development of China and also serve as a bridge for the development of China and the Western world's communication, allow us to work together to reduce the noise in the news, allow us to seek truth from fact and really work together for a more peaceful world. For that, I really am very hopeful for Hong Kong. And thank you to Tony and Anissa. You have done a beautiful job for us, very informative and very educational.